It's time to install the oil pump. Putting in a new oil pump. If you're going to rebuild an engine, you should always put in a new oil pump. This part down here is called the windage tray. The windage tray keeps the oil down below the crank so the crank doesn't have to churn through the oil as hard. Before you put the oil pan on, you need the gasket. It's a one-piece gasket, and you put a little dab of sealer in the corners. It's time for the oil pan. Some engines like this have an oil filter adapter so that you can have lines going up to the tranny cooler. If it doesn't have this adapter, that'd be where the oil filter would go. And then we have to put in a plug. And on this side, the knock sensor. Now we're done with the bottom side. Time to turn it over and start the top. We've already put on the water pump. Okay, we're going to put the heads on now. The head should always go to the machine shop to have whatever work is done to them. Usually new valves, valve seats, grind the valves. Sometimes the heads will come off and they really don't need a whole lot of work. They're in good shape. But they should always go to the machine shop to be checked for cracks. Either don't need to be or have them resurfaced. The head bolts, you have two short bolts, one on each end. The rest of them are longer. Now after you run the head bolts down, it's time to torque them. As you know, all head bolts have to be torqued. There's a specific torque amount of torque. Sometimes there's a sequence of so much and then another, and there's a pattern that you need to do. So be sure and refer to your service manual for the engine you're working on. Torque them down in the right sequence and to the right spec.
Alright, now we're going to go ahead and install the push rods. We've got the heads torqued down. Go ahead and put your little dab of semi-lube or some kind of little grease on your lifters. Don't put a whole bunch, but put a little bit. And then slide your push rods in. Before you do this, blow through them. Make sure you can blow air all the way through the passages. Put a little dab of semi-lube on your push rods and on tops of your valves. That way you get no premature wear. Now we'll go ahead and install the rocker arms. The little swivel balls. Taper end goes down, flat end towards the top. Put your nuts on. Alright, I'm just going to suck these down a little bit and get them close. Okay, we'll turn the engine over and we'll get top dead center and we'll adjust the valve. All we're going to do is tighten this rocker arm down until it just touches the push rod. What I'm doing is I'm spinning the push rod until the rocker arm just touches it right now. That's zero clearance. Now for a race motor that would be fine, but we're going to drive this on the street. So you can go a quarter, a half, 3/4. The book calls for 3/4 of a turn. I like going a half a turn. And then that valve's adjusted. We'll move on to this one. Always make sure that your lifter's all the way down, that you're off of your lifter. You can adjust any valve you want as long as you turn the cam, turn the engine over to where your lifter goes all the way down. Once your lifter's all the way down, then you can adjust it.
You rotate that push rod you can tell when the lifter actually binds with it.
Half turn.
Now you'll see that lifter is up on the left, with the one on the right that is adjusting is down. So you can go along here and adjust all of them that are down, and then you need to turn the crank again until the ones that are up are down, and then you can do those.
We're going to turn the motor over again.
Now to help it out, you want to pour some oil all over all the rockers and push rods. Get them oiled up. And then you want to just pour it right down in the valley as well. You're going to have to put oil in it anyway, so put at least a quart in this way. Okay, it's time for the intake. We've got our intake gaskets in place. Where you got this second? And you see right down in here we put a dab of this sealant right in the valley. While we were waiting on the machine work to be done, we basically worked over this intake. You can see it looks pretty clean because we sandblasted it, cleaned everything, cleaned all the surfaces, put in new gaskets. Snug them down with the impact, the air gun, and then we'll torque them to spec. Anytime you're torquing something, always refer to your service manual. The intakes here refer down to 20. We're going to torque them down to 20 foot-pounds. We're putting on new valve covers, but when you're putting on center bolt valve covers, you see the bolts are right down the center. There's a little notch right here that needs to go towards the top. Slide the alternator bracket on.
Alright, now we're going to turn the motor over to top dead center compression so we can stab the extruder. Got my finger in number 1 piston hole.
What you're feeling for there is for the pressure to start pushing your finger out. You know that you're starting compression. After you feel the air pushing out of the number 1 cylinder, then you go to your timing mark, and it should line up with the harmonic balancer and the mark on the engine. It's good at this point to take some kind of whiteout or something like that and mark it so we can set the timing once we get it running. Now this distributor can go in either a 6-cylinder or 8-cylinder. If you look right here, there's a 6, or over here there's an 8. You want to point your rotor right at the 8. Now our rotor is pointing right at the 8. Now you want to look at the bottom, so rotate it up and see where your oil pump shaft needs to be. You may have to take a long screwdriver and stick it down the distributor shaft and get the oil pump lined up so that when you stick that shaft down in there, it'll line up. Now as you stick the distributor down into that hole, you're trying to line the bottom up with that oil drive, and at the same time you want that rotor pointing towards the number 1 cylinder, which should be in this corner right up here. Sometimes it takes several attempts to get it just right. Time for the exhaust manifold.
Okay, here's a completed stroker, Vortec. We pulled a stock 350 out of the truck, and we built a 383 stroker Vortec for this truck. And I know a lot of you are thinking about the color. I'm building this for my daughter. She's 16, so that's why the color is that. Alright, now we're going to stick the engine back in the truck, see how she runs.